Okay, so you're asked to calculate the area of the triangle. The way in which we do that is we have to plug it into the formula. Area is equal to base times height divided in half. So we have a base of radical 10. We're going to multiply that to 2 over radical 5, and that's all being divided by 2. So then we get 2 radical 10 over radical 5 divided by 2. Radical 5 goes into radical 10, radical 2 times. So we have 2 radical 2 all over 2. The 2's cancel out. And finally, the area is equal to a radical 2. The triangle shown below has a perimeter of 6.5 radical 2 units. Make a conjecture about how this answer was reached. Well, we know that perimeter is the sum of all sides. So I'm anticipating that if we combine 2 radical 2 plus 3 radical 2 plus 1.5 radical 2, we get 2 plus 3 is 5, plus 1.5 is 6.5, and we keep the radicand of 2. So 6.5 radical 2. So in order to add and subtract radicals, the first thing that you need to do is simplify all terms. Add and subtract only the coefficients of like radicals, and then you're going to keep the radical. So we're going to look to simplify first, and we can do this with the radical 18. So it's 3 times the square root of 9 times the square root of 2 plus 10 radical 2. So then we get 3 times 3 radical 2 plus 10 radical 2. The 3's get multiplied, so we get 9 radical 2 plus 10 radical 2. We got like radicals, so the only thing that gets combined are the 9 and 10. So in effect, we get 19 radical 2 as our final output. As far as b, we can simplify the radical 8. So that simplifies the 4 times 2. We still have the 2 here. So 19 radical 2 minus 2 times 2 radical 2, which gives us 4 radical 2. 19 radical 2 is still to the left. So now we have like radicals, and what gets combined are the 19 minus 4. The difference is 15 radical 2. Moving on. Okay, so we're asked to simplify these following expressions. We have like radicands or radicals. We can't simplify them any further, so we're going to keep them. The difference between 18 and 12 is 6. Radical 5 is the final output. Here we can simplify a radical 24. So let's go ahead and do that. My perfect square we have is 4 times 6. Same thing over here. So we take the square root of 4, that becomes 2. Radical 6 stays plus 5 times. When you take the square root of 4 is 2. Take the square root of 6, stays square root of 6. We multiply the 5 and 2 and get 10 radical 6. And 2 radical 6 gets dropped down. We have like radicands, so we're going to keep that. Or radicals, we have like radicals. And the only thing that gets combined are the 2 and 10. So that's 12 radical 6 as our final output. Okay, so we looked to simplify. We can do so with the square root of 63. That's going to be 9 times 7, which becomes 3 radical 7. Drop the 4, and add the 2 radical 7. You have to multiply these two numbers first and get 12 radical 7. Bring down the 2 radical 7. I have like radicals, so I can go ahead and keep that, and then only combine the 2 and 12, which gives me 14 radical 7. So what is the perimeter of the triangle shown below? That means we're going to find the sum of all sides. So we have radical 12 plus a radical 32 plus 2 radical 2. 2 radical 2 can stay like that. That's the most simplified, but radical 12 breaks down to 4 times 3. Square root, 2 radical 3. Radical 32 breaks down to perfect square of 6 times 2. And we get 4 radical 2. Bring down the 2 radical 2. We keep 2 radical 3 because we can't combine that with anything, being that its radical is different from the other two. So the only thing we combine are the 4 and 2, which makes 6, and keep the radical of 2. This is your final answer. The next one, we want to determine the area of the triangle. So that's base times height divided in half. So this is our base. This is our height. Radical 24 times 5 radical 6 divided by 2. I would simplify the radical 24 first. Okay, so that breaks down to 4 times 6, which simplifies to 2 radical 6. Times 5 radical 6, all divided by 2. So 2 times 5 is 10. A radical 6 times a radical 6 is a positive 6. It really makes the square root of 36, and that's a perfect square. So that's going to be times 6, all divided by 2. So 60 divided in half is equal to 30. And that's the area of this triangle. Okay, number 6. Determine the area and perimeter of the rectangle shown. Simplify as much as possible. Okay, so the area of a rectangle is length times width. And of course the perimeter is double the length plus double the width. So let's start out with the area. 11 radical 3 times a radical 75. Okay, you can simplify this beforehand or you can simplify after. I'm going to go ahead and simplify this first because that's a perfect square of 25 times 3. Then I get 5 radical 3. And then I could just multiply that to the 11 radical 3 to just make things easier. So I get 55 times the square root of 9, which is equal to 3. And that's equal to 165. So the perimeter is equal to double the length, which we know is 11 radical 3, plus double the width, which we know to equal 5 radical 3. So the square root of 75 is 5 radical 3, so I'm going to use that over here because I already simplified that. So here we get 22 radical 3 plus 10 radical 3. Combine only the outside numbers, and we get 32 radical 3 as your final output. The associated homework attached with this lesson is due next class.